Welcome to the In Search of More podcast. I am your host, Eli Nash. Join me weekly on my quest for more from myself and more from this world. We'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome, Adrienne.
Thank you.
I'm sitting here with Adrienne Jezick, the founder of the Morozko Method and a partner in the Morozko Forge, the product.
Yes.
The high-end ice baths.
We're fancy.
So before we go into cold plunge, the benefits of it and what you've learned about it, I'd like to get into your story a little bit.
Absolutely.
Kind of how you found the ice, why it was important to you.
Well, it was definitely despite my best efforts. I grew up in Florida. I lived in Hawaii, spent the last 20 years in Phoenix, Arizona. I now live in Austin, Texas, and I still prefer the heat. 6 years into this deliberate cold exposure practice, I still prefer the heat. But everything that I was learning on my journey of discovering my own illness and reasons that I got sick with autoimmune and ways to help myself with symptom management, everything that I was learning was pointing to cold exposure as a healing benefit to help with inflammation, sleep, energy. Everything that I was reading was pointing towards cold.
What were you dealing with before when you say autoimmune disorders?
I had Hashimoto's, thyroiditis, eosinophilic esophagitis, and urticaria. So those last two are when the EOEs, when hives present within your esophagus, when you are presented with allergies or a histamine reaction. Urticarias, where hives just presented on the outside of my body anytime that I had an allergic reaction. And now with Hashimoto's, you can hardly throw a stone in a room without finding someone who has Hashimoto's.
What is Hashimoto's?
So that affects the thyroid. So that impacts the way that our thyroids produce the hormones necessary for all functions within the body. And you can end up with just hypothyroid, or you can have the autoimmune version, which is Hashimoto's. And because I had the autoimmune version, I had Hashimoto's, which then quickly led to two additional autoimmune, I call them sentences, but really diagnoses. At the height of my illness, I was taking more than 20 plus prescription medications, vitamins, and supplements every single day, and 2 live antibody shots per month from my allergist. And even in the height of this, I was never feeling any better. No matter how many medications they put me on, no matter what specialist I saw, the symptoms just kept getting worse. I started becoming more tired, more in pain, having more difficulty just showing up in my life. And so my relationships were suffering. My job was suffering. I was suffering. And I felt like I just didn't have what it took to show up in life. Like I was out of energy before breakfast most days. I had chronic pain all the time.
What were you doing for work at the time?
At the time, I was in city infrastructure. So my background is in cosmetology. So in a previous existing career life, I was doing skin and hair and keeping people beautiful on the outside. And in transitions, I ended up in city infrastructure. So it was like a 9-to-5 office job, stress to the point that, you're dealing with the city and dealing with employees. And so there is stress involved, 2-3 hour commute most days. So definitely stress there. And it wasn't an entirely healthy environment. Most of my coworkers were cigarette smokers, and that was just never an easy thing for me. But I was struggling. I was struggling in life. I was struggling just to exist and to just be in life. And I was reading a lot, fiction and nonfiction. And in the nonfiction, I was reading Nassim Taleb, Anti-Fragile, Aubrey Marcus, Own the Day. In the fiction realm, I was reading Steinbeck and Hemingway and learning that even in fiction novels, they were referencing cold exposure and being cold to alert you or to pull you out of an emotional state. Or, as Vibrancy, Ernest Hemingway would refuse to light the coals in his Paris apartment because he knew if he was cold, he would be more focused and more creative in his endeavors. He would also skip eating beans for 3 days in a row. And instead of, spreading his money out eating beans 3 days in a row, he would save up that money, not eat for 3 days, and then eat one really hearty meal at a fine restaurant. He understood the value of, eating one quality meal every 3 days rather than subsisting a life on just canned beans. And so learning through even these fictional books and these people from more than 50 years ago talking about cold exposure, everything was leading to taking an ice bath.
But some of that you're referring to would be more, sounds like more long-term cold exposure, meaning living in a cold environment.
Not necessarily. There are even acute situations. I believe it was East of Eden by John Steinbeck, where at one point there was a few guys that were thrown into the cold river to stop an argument. And when you think of, dogs that are fighting or two young boys that are wrestling and you can't get them to calm down, you splash cold water on them because it's that instant stop, that instant pause of, wait, what's going on? It's that shock to the system. Well, what we don't realize, or what we're starting to realize now, is it's not just that shock to the system of, oh, I'm cold, I'm wet, what's going on? It's also the chemicals that are produced when we are submerged in cold water. So we get this boost of norepinephrine, we get this boost of dopamine, we get serotonin, oxytocin, all of these feel-good chemicals coming from within our body just from being exposed to cold water.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Take us back to the autoimmune. So you're dealing with those things, you're reading, you're coming across different stuff, and then kind of the first thing out of Western medicine you tried was cold exposure, or you went through other
The
modalities?
first thing that I tried was the Walls Protocol by Dr. Terry Walls. She is a doctor with multiple sclerosis and created a low inflammation food regimen so that she could focus on whole ingredient eating and food as medicine. And that was powerful for me. Changing the way that I was feeding my body was very powerful. It didn't impact my weight. It didn't have a significant impact on my mood, but my belly felt better, and that was very good for me. I also experimented with extending and later on intermittent fasting, not even realizing at the time really what I was doing to my body. So these were things that I was experimenting with at the time that I found the cold, but none of these things had the impact the way the cold did. So my very first ice bath, this is like November 5th or 6th in 2017. My ex-husband bought the big horse trough, the big metal horse trough. We invited some friends over. Everyone brought a few 20-pound bags of ice, so we had about 300 pounds of ice. We sat in the yard and did a round of Wim Hof breath work, which is that hyperventilative, holotropic, hyperactive breathing. And then it was time to take an ice bath. And at the time, I had no idea what I was doing. And even in Wim Hof, they don't tell you how to take an ice bath. They just tell you, here's your breath work, now go get cold.
Right.
So I go over to the ice bath and I put one foot on either side of the tub and I put one hand on either side of the tub and I dropped myself into the water and held my breath. Turns out that lasted about 9 seconds. And then I leapt out and I freaked out. And there were two things that happened right away that told me that I was definitely going to do this again. Not that day, I was not going to take an ice bath again that day, but that I was definitely going to continue this practice. And the first thing that I noticed was the chronic pain in my legs that I'd had for nearly a decade was completely gone.
Wow.
And anyone who lives with chronic pain will tell you they'll do just about anything for a moment of relief. And so I had this instantaneous, complete relief of chronic pain in my legs. Also, if you want to see a little video of Adrienne's first ice bath, just go to Morozko Forge YouTube or Google Adrienne's first ice bath, and you will see that hilarious video that I'm so glad that I have. And the other thing that I noticed was a sense of empowerment. A sense of empowerment.
I did something hard.
Yes, because here I am in the throes of autoimmune, very sick, not able to do most things I want to do, let alone the things that I have to do. And this was something I just did. Like, wow, I did that. I could do that. And I felt good.
Did your husband buy the ice bath with your autoimmune disease in mind, or just as something interesting?
He was working on his own issues. So my two business partners, one being my ex-husband, Jason Stauffer, the other one being Dr. Thomas P. Seeger, who is a dear mentor to me and teacher, we all approached the cold at the same time, but for different reasons. So for Jason, he's a combat veteran. And he didn't even realize in the beginning, he was more thinking of, how can I help my wife? What can I do to help my wife feel better? And so he was more focused on how could he help me feel better? And through the practice, discovered benefits for his own experiences being a combat veteran.
Right.
And then my business partner, Tom, got into it because he was in his early 50s at the time. Didn't have a really great review from his, whatever the doctor is that tests the prostate health. and his doctor wanted to put him on synthetic testosterone. And Tom, who doesn't like to take pills for anything or lean on medication for anything if he can help it, said there has to be a natural way to approach this. And that's how he was discovering that cold exposure helps increase
It
testosterone.
does.
It definitely does.
Oh, it
Oh
does.
my goodness, go to the Morozko Forge website. Check out the science tab. We have articles upon articles talking about the way that cold exposure helps naturally produce testosterone. So he's had his testosterone checked every single year since we all three started this practice together. And within just 2 years, his testosterone was now testing at the level of a 19-year-old male in his 50s, which is amazing. So each of us approached this practice for completely different reasons, and each of us ended up receiving benefits that we could have never even anticipated, such as the mental and the emotional healing that comes with it.
So how did it go from that first 9-second ice plunge to now, where this is kind of your calling card?
How much time do you have?
Yes.
So we quickly realized that even November, December in Phoenix, Arizona, it was difficult to maintain any type of freezing temperatures in the backyard. You're definitely not getting a cold shower. There's no cold water coming out of the tap. And buying 300 to 400 pounds of ice every time you want to take an ice bath is horribly inefficient.
Yeah.
Not to mention all of the plastic from the bags that cannot be recycled, the hauling it back and forth. And then even when you do fill up that tub with water and ice, 300 pounds worth, you're only going to get 5 to 6 ice baths out of it, and then you're done for the day.
Right.
And so we tried to make our own ice, buying the big pretzel and salsa containers from Costco, lopping off the top and filling the freezer. And then, every night you'd spend about an hour emptying these big ice cubes out of the containers, refilling them, putting them back in the freezer.
Right.
And it was horribly inefficient. You're still only getting 1 ice bath a week. Then we thought, well, what if we do the chest freezer route? So Tom took on that project and he says, I know, I'll take a chest freezer, I'll put it on my apartment balcony, and I'll turn that into an ice bath. And it was quickly discovered by us that that was horribly inefficient too. Those chest freezers are not meant to carry the weight of 100 gallons of water. They're not meant to carry us stepping in and out. So even if properly sealed, they end up with leaks. There are other issues that come along. And then that kind of closing top thing felt kind of coffin-like. And so it was also not exactly efficient. Plus, we couldn't keep it clean.
So I've seen people do that. So they use a freezer, regular freezer that you can
Regular
buy for
chest freezer.
times a few $100s.
Mm-hmm.
Lie it on its side.
Yep. And you can you do all these sealing practices. You can even add your own filtration to it. You can do your own grounding to it. There are people that are doing this for their practice. And some people, my friend Todd, he's had his for I think 3 years now, and he still uses that method. But for us, it was still woefully inefficient. And then for Tom and Jason being engineers, they're like, this is dangerous and we can do better. That was really their thought, was like, how do we create something that can provide 24/7 cold and have it at the ready for whenever we need it.
Right.
And so Tom started shipping mini dorm fridges to our house and telling Jason, tear them apart, just figure out where cold comes from. And here I'm thinking he's going to blow up the house. And he explains to me this is not how thermodynamics work. Okay, cool. That's good to know. But once he figured out where cold comes from within these freezers, he dropped these components over the side of our first ugly prototype in our backyard that sat on a bed of sand and had these 4 plywood walls around it with all this spray foam to keep it insulated. And he drops these components in and he throws the old door of the chest freezer on top to keep it nice and sealed. And within about 48 hours, we had our 24/7 ice bath. And to us, that was the greatest thing in the world. We're like, boom, we solved it. We figured it out. And through this practice and through this process, we realized we weren't just solving our own problems. We were solving problems for many people who wanted deliberate cold exposure at home. And at the time that we got into this industry, the only major player in the game was Cold Tub. And Cold Tub focused mainly on professional facilities. So they had these big, huge tubs that were about $20,000 to $30,000, would house maybe 2 to 3 people, and never got below 50 degrees.
Oh.
And the other thing that we were discovering in this practice was that the colder to freezing we could get, the more impact it had on our health. The more we felt when we got out that we had that full reset. We were noticing that when we were doing temperatures over 40 degrees, we didn't get that same kind of 1-2 punch of the cold concentrate of sitting in a freezing
Oh,
ice
so you're
bath.
recommending like the 33, 34, 35
Absolutely.
degrees. Okay.
Absolutely. And so this is what we wanted. This is what we craved. We'd gotten used to plunging at these freezing temperatures. And so for us, nothing else would do. And Tom and Jason figured it out. They invented this product. And in January 2019, we sold our very first unit. This company started as a backyard project in Jason and I's home in Phoenix, Arizona. We were in the backyard until November 2020. Just about every one of us fell into the pool at some point or another. I mean, we took over just about every square foot of space in our house. Finding a commercial warehouse that would rent to us for our purpose was very difficult. We did need to rent. We weren't in a position to buy. We work in wood, solvents, electric, and water. So that narrowed our commercial availability down to about 2% in the entire valley of Phoenix, Arizona. And when we did find a space to rent to, it was about a 5,000 square foot warehouse space in South Phoenix. We moved right in, filled it right up. We have since taken over the space next door, and we have about 10,000 square feet where we handcraft these ice baths in
Wow.
Phoenix, Arizona.
And customers have responded.
And what?
I said customers have responded well.
Customers have responded well. And, one of the things that we discovered was because we created this space, we were the first players in this space for the home user. We did not wait and put out a perfect product. In January in all of 2019, we were just putting out, this is what we've got. We'll fix it if it breaks and let us know how it goes. Give us your feedback.
Right.
We did not wait for a perfect product. So our early adopter customers are to this day still some of our best customers because they've taught us a lot about what they want, what features are important to them. And some of our earliest units, most of our earliest units are still in service to this day.
That's awesome. So what features do you find are important to customers? Because I did my research. I bought one. What was important for me was I wanted 24/7. I wanted to clean it.
Yeah.
That's it.
That is truly the most important. I want it cold and I want it clean. And what was important to us was that it made its own ice. I want to sit in an ice bath with big fat chunks of ice. I want to feel that gravity blanket feeling. I want to know that that temperature is as close to 32 degrees as possible.
Oh, so yours produces ice.
It produces its own ice.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
And so it is a self-making ice machine, so to speak.
It's not just cooling it. You're
It's
physically
freezing it.
seeing ice.
Yes, you are creating ice within that machine. The other thing that was important to us was because I was so sick, I didn't want to sit in a tub of chemicals. So when we created our filtration system, it was important for us to use filtration that was not going to require chlorine, aldehyde, descummers. So we have a full micron filtration with ozone disinfection that requires no harsh chemicals. So it will keep your machine crystal clear 24/7 at those 33-degree temperatures while making its own ice without the need of any type of chlorine, aldehyde, or descummers.
Got it. Okay, so yours is getting down to 33 degrees.
Yeah.
Neat.
Or more, or lower, because we do have the filtration, which moves the water. You build up a few layers of ice, you can get down to about 32.5 degrees.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Really neat.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the practice of it. When someone says cold plunge, it's obviously not jumping in for 9 seconds and jumping out. So what is it? How often? The temperature you're mentioning. So the one I have, I think the lowest it gets to is 39.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested in that, like the various temperatures and where's the benefit start from. So we just talk about the practice. What is the practice of
Yeah,
cold plunge?
absolutely. So when I got into this practice, like I said, I started with the Wim Hof method. And what I discovered very quickly by like my third or fourth ice bath was that method was not for me, not at the time. I was so sick. I had no energy. I had nothing to give. So this hyperactive holotropic breath work was putting me into a state of anxiety so that by my third or fourth ice bath, I'm standing in front of the tub and I'm frozen. And I just couldn't imagine getting in. I couldn't imagine, first of all, lobbing myself in, dropping myself into the water. And I also couldn't imagine, like, I was in such an activated state. I could not imagine getting into the cold and being more activated. I knew that if I could just get to the other side of it, I was going to feel better. But how do I get there?
So let's explain for those who are not familiar. He's obviously very well known, but Wim Hof, his ice plunge method. So he's always recommending a certain breathing and kind of
Yeah.
before jumping into the water?
It's a hyperactive holotropic breath work. So you can do it like 3 rounds
So
in
he doesn't
about 30
recommend going into the
minutes.
water without that.
Mm, Wim has a lot of different ideas about ways to approach the water. The Wim Hof method specifically is that breath work of for 30 minutes or even 60 minutes. And what that does is that is increasing your blood flow. That is bringing heat to the surface of the skin. That's doing a lot of things to prepare you for what it feels like to be cold.
Got it. So the first number of times you did ice plunge, you always started with the Wim Hof
For
breathing
the
before.
first like 3-ish times
Got
that I did that, I was starting with that. And what I noticed was I was still in that anxious state. And what I noticed was that by meeting the cold with that anxious state, I was enhancing that anxious state. Even though I was seeing benefits, even though good things were happening, by this third or fourth ice bath, I was frozen in a state of anxiety. I couldn't even get in. And that's when I started to draw on my own experience. I'd been in dialectical behavioral therapy, and what I learned was that if I was in an anxious head state, I had to bring myself into my body. And how to do that was by activating my physical senses. What could I hear, see, smell, taste, and touch? So as I'm standing outside of the ice, I'm thinking of this. I'm like, well, I can feel the sunshine. I can smell my coffee. I can
Mm,
taste my coffee. My feet, I can feel them grounded beneath me. I can hear the birds. And so I'm bringing myself into my body with this intentional state.
right.
And so I also realized I needed to choose this practice. I needed to step in with intention. I needed to sit down by choice, lean back by choice, embrace this discomfort by choice,
As opposed to
as opposed to
not thinking about it, just
competing
jumping in.
against it, as
Got
opposed to meeting it with that, I'm going to do this. I
Right.
had to find a way to surrender in this experience.
Right. So to be kind of more present to it, not I'm just jumping in and
Right,
yes.
right. Not letting it do all the work. Me choosing to participate, to be an active participant. And so this ice bath, I just stepped in, I sat down, I leaned back, I breathed, I got out in the same type of calm manner that I entered it. And that's when I really started to see a shift in my mental, my emotional presence, my empowerment piece, being able to calmly surrender to that fight or flight experience when in freezing cold water. And because I was seeing so many incredible benefits, I started sharing this with anyone who would listen. I'm like, just come to the house. I'll walk you through it. I'll use my technique. You're going to do great. And in this technique that I use for myself, I started introducing other people. By the end of 2019, I realized this is a method. This is a practice. I need to teach other people to do this because I'm not going to be able to guide everyone in the world's first ice bath.
Right. Is it something you can touch on quickly here, or is it better if you refer to maybe a YouTube video or something else where we
Check
talk
out
about
my
it?
YouTube videos. There is a playlist for Morozko for deliberate cold exposure meditations on the Morozko Forge YouTube. You can also find my meditations on the Insight Timer app, and you
Cool.
can go to my website, adriennejezick.com, and get access there as well.
So you recommend a meditation leading right into the cold plunge.
Yes.
How
And
long does
so
that take?
the
Approximately?
Morozko method is approximately 5 minutes of a mindful meditation practice. Then you step into the cold with full intention with a guide. So here's the other difference with the Morozko method. You've got someone right there every step of the way helping you through the process. Whether it's one of my certified guides guiding you through in person or on Zoom, or if you're just pressing play on a meditation, I'm right there every step of the way telling you exactly what to do. Also, activating those mirror neurons. You see me, I'm in a calm state. There's a slight bit
Right.
of hypnosis. I am putting you into a state of suggestion through this mindful meditation. And it's helping you meet the cold with calm. The other part of it is that when you step out, you step into the power pose. Familiar with the power pose? We call it Superman pose or Wonder Woman pose, warrior pose.
Right.
And this pose is actually called arms akimbo. So I'm pulling from science and mindfulness and meditation and body language. Joe Navarro, what everybody is saying, he's a 20+ year FBI behavioral analyst, and he talks about the power pose, arms akimbo, and why standing in that pose for 2 minutes create chemicals of calm
That's one with your
confidence in the
legs spread
brain.
apart, hands above?
Hands out to the sides
Okay.
and feet spread apart. Amy Cuddy does a whole TED talk on it. the power pose and how it impacts our body and impacts our
Oh,
brain.
you're talking like that kind of pose. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you step out as part of the Morozko method, you do not start working out. You don't go into, big heavy movement. You're standing still. You're standing still and you're allowing the cold shock proteins to do the work. You're allowing your body to warm itself on your own. You're also teaching yourself how to be still amidst chaos, how to be still amongst the stress response. Typically, when met with stress, we become reactive. What we want to teach, what I teach with the Morozko method in this practice with the cold, is how to become responsive, which is why this impacts everywhere in life that you experience
Right. Any
stress.
stress.
So
Right.
you could
Using
be
the same.
driving down the road or standing on stage or having a difficult romantic conversation, raising a toddler or a teenager, and you can employ this method. I've spent a lot of time this year working with combat veterans, first responders, and sober living facilities, teaching this method in the cold because of the way that it impacts our lives when we're out of the cold. So, as far as best practice, I mean, the most common misconception about cold is that if I do 2 minutes and I feel great, then if I do 10 minutes, I'll feel like Superman. And the truth is that this is a minimum effective dose practice 2 to 3 minutes, maybe five, if you're on those warmer temperatures. But this is cold concentrate. You do not have to spend a lot of time in the cold to have a drastic impact. And more is not always better. You can experience diminishing returns if you are in the cold water for too long.
So is the diminishing returns with the length of time in the water or even the frequency of it?
Could be both. So anytime that you're struggling to warm up or you get to that point where you've got uncontrollable shivering, it's enough. It's enough.
But in terms of, okay, so 2 minutes would kind of be the minimum of it?
2 minutes for minimum for max health benefits. I find most people find comfort in a practice around 3 to 5 minutes. My
Right.
sweet spot's about 3.5 as well, as long as I'm at 33 degrees. But if I was in 45 or 55, I'd have to go 10, 15 minutes to get similar benefits. I still don't think they would be quite the same, but similar benefits. So I think that the majority of the benefits, in my belief, come below 37, 38 degrees. You want to activate that fight or flight response in the body because when you're doing that, you're doing a few different things. All systems in the body are coming online to give you optimum efficiency at surviving whatever this, your body thinks this is. And you're also giving yourself the most benefit for inflammation reduction. And you're teaching yourself a mindful presence of what it's like to be activated in a state of fight or flight and calmly move through that and become responsive rather than reactive.
Got you. So the stuff online that will say anything under 60 degrees is an ice plunge, you disagree with?
I think any amount of cold is a good amount of cold because if it's making you uncomfortable and you're choosing to sit with that, there's going to be a benefit.
Psychologically.
Psychologically,
Right.
mentally, emotionally, even physically. Even physically. If we are uncomfortable in a state of cold and we choose to sit with that, we are teaching ourselves something through that practice. I believe Andrew Huberman says that it has to be below 55 degrees to really get a benefit.
Got it.
Yeah, about 11 minutes a week below 55 degrees.
But that's interesting that you're specifically recommending temperatures that most cold plunge manufacturers don't even touch.
Right. Right. Most cold plunge manufacturers manufacture cold plunges. They have chiller boxes. They sit outside the tub.
Right.
The water runs through. There's a warming process that happens when it goes through that process. Making ice is not easy. Most people have not chosen to go the difficult route that we did. And also,
And making ice is what allows you to get to those temperatures.
making ice allows us to get to those temperatures and allows us to put the body into a state of shock. I like to think of autoimmune as like a dog without a job. So if you don't take your dog out, you give it walks, you give it a job, it's going to destroy your home. When I wasn't introducing enough external resilience for my body to start to build itself against, it was like my body turned on itself. The super sophisticated machine needs a job to do. And when I just go from climate controlled environment to climate controlled environment, I'm not introducing any external resilience. When I started taking ice baths, it was like, whoa, wait a minute, what's she doing to us? We got to keep her alive. So the dog got a job.
How long did it take for you to see those benefits? I know you mentioned knees having chronic pain that you saw instant results, but in terms of the, 20 pills a day and not needing those anymore, just There's no
So first iced bath
diagnosis.
November 2017. By August of 2019, I'd weaned myself off of all prescription medication. The first thing to go were the vitamins and supplements because I knew I didn't technically need those to live. And I spent several months throughout 2019 weaning myself slowly off of my prescription medications. So by the time I went in for my labs to my endocrinologist in August of 2019, I did not tell her that I wasn't taking any prescription medication. I just had her read my labs, like just tell me how I'm doing. And she let me know that everything was within range, and it was looking great. She wanted me to just keep doing what I was doing. And I was like, great, because guess what? I'm not taking any medication and I'm taking ice baths. She's like, I'll put that in your file. This is fantastic. I hope I never have to see you again. And I was really excited at first. At first, I was like, this is great. I hope I never have to see you again, too. And I walk out of that office feeling high as a kite. The problem is I'm walking through the waiting room and I see about a dozen other people, overweight, completely sick, stuck in the system. And do you think she's going to tell anyone that I just reversed autoimmune, that I have no trace of autoimmune in my system, despite the fact that that is unheard of, that this is a chronic illness? There's nothing I did to get it. There's nothing I can do to get rid of it, but yet somehow I just did. And legally, I'm not allowed to say that I cured my autoimmune. I'm not legally supposed to say that. I'm supposed to say I reversed it. I'm supposed to say that I show no signs of it, that there's no presence of it in my system. But it made me very angry. I got very angry when I walked out and I realized like she wasn't going to tell anyone about this benefit, about these possibilities, that with cold water, even if it didn't reverse anything, I was alleviating my symptoms. And so I decided at that moment that I would make it my life's mission to share the healing benefits of the cold with anyone who would listen.
Oh, fascinating.
Mm-hmm. And I've not had autoimmune since.
And how about with others? Have you seen these kind of effects with others with autoimmune specifically?
It's been incredible. I know personally 3 women who have now reversed Hashimoto's through deliberate cold exposure. I know several people who have reversed Raynaud's syndrome. Raynaud's is when you get a lot of pain in your digits, your fingers, or your toes. You get numbness, or you get extreme, like it feels like needles or like knives or like chilblains going through your digits when you're exposed to the cold. And the first thing doctors will tell you with Raynaud's is don't expose yourself to the cold. When I know 4 different people, 2 of them doctors, who have reversed that through deliberate cold exposure. It's a circulatory issue. It's a vascular issue. I know people who have cured cancer through this practice, who have reversed symptoms of multiple sclerosis, who have reversed symptoms of Guillain-Barré syndrome. There's a young woman I know who was in a wheelchair at the worst of her Guillain-Barré, and she was eating through a tube, and now she's re-enrolling in medical school.
And the one change was ice.
Deliberate cold exposure.
So you're recommending 2 to 5 minutes at extremely low temperatures. What about the frequency of it?
As often as possible. When you are in active autoimmune, when you're in active illness, a near daily practice is great. I don't think we should be doing anything every single day. Not eating, breathing is about the only thing that we should do every single day. And when it comes to, if you're working on something with autoimmune, you're working on something with cancer, I recommend a daily practice for the lymphatic and the detoxification benefits, for the reduction of inflammation, and because it produces all of these feel-good chemicals. So at the very least, it's going to help you feel better and stronger mentally and emotionally about what you're going through physically.
Right. And we should talk about that for a second, because the mood change, I mean, is so dramatic. I'll talk about my experience with it. What happened is, I've been dealing on and off with mono for the last number of years. Here and there it comes up. And I had a few hits with it about a year ago. So that maybe played into it, where I was paying more attention to my health. But I had these podcasts, and usually when I do them, because I work full time, so the way I structure these is twice a month, I do 4 or 5 a day. Which
That's
could
a
get
lot.
which could get fairly intense. And it's not only the length of time, it's the variation of the conversation. So here I am completely with you talking about cold, and then after this I can be talking to someone else, struggling with something and sharing a very personal story, and then later can be completely different. And I felt like I needed something to break it up. Anyway, one morning, before I had the first podcast I was recording, I went to a guy, Wim Hof trained. It's called the Miami Ice Club.
Mhm.
And I did the We did the breathing. We did the cold plunge. Used the big freezers. And when I came out of it, I felt amazing, and I felt the difference during the course of the day. And then these other practices that I was using for breaking up the podcasts that day, I was like, hey, it would be so cool if I had another ice plunge now, something to do that. And then eventually I pulled the plug on it, because what's fascinating about the cold plunge is it's so simple, but it's actually fairly expensive to pull off, which is disappointing, but it is expensive to do. There are no very cheap options.
Access, I think, is the number one challenge with this practice. Because pretty much if you're in the southern states, you're not getting cold showers even in wintertime. And so access to the cold can be the most challenging part of adopting this practice. And there are a lot of different ways we can do it. Like you said, Miami Ice Club. There are contrast centers popping up in all over the US, all over the world, where people are offering cold and heat as a service. And they usually add in red light, they add in compression therapy. But even if you don't have access to a facility, you can buy 300 pounds of ice and fill your bathtub or a container. You can go out into nature. There are many places in nature that we can experience temperatures below 55 degrees. If you do that, don't go below the waist. You want to make sure that if your body starts to slow down, you're in a position that you can escape easily. So don't just go out there and swim on your first try. Bring a buddy. Have an exit strategy. You don't want a whole bunch of buttons, tiny buttons when your hands are cold, getting dressed afterwards. So have some loose, warm, dry clothing ready for post plunge if you're doing it in nature. And keep in mind, if there's snow on the banks or snow in the sky and that water is running, it could be below freezing. So these are important things to keep in mind. But we can also stop an emotionally dysregulated state simply by putting an ice cube on the inside of the wrist, or simply by filling a large bowl with ice just for moments. Just put it on the wrist, and that will stop your emotionally dysregulated state, just leaving it there for a few moments. You can also fill a large bowl with ice and add water. Dunk your face 3 to 5 times, dunk your hands 3 to 5 times, dunk your feet 3 to 5 times. Do it in that order, so you're not putting foot water on your face unless you're into something I don't know about. Or you can, do cold as a service in a facility. Like, there are different ways to access it. And I truly believe that any amount of cold is a good amount of cold. If you're uncomfortable, you're doing the work.
Right.
And cold showers. They're my least favorite.
They are hard.
Yeah.
I was up in New York last week, and I took a couple of those because I didn't have the cold plunge. And I was like, wow, it's not as cold as the cold plunge, but it
feels aggressive.
It's right. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it was tough to get comfortable with it. Let's talk about the mood benefits of it. I saw this Instagram meme, and I'm not sure if it's true. It said the only 2 things that can raise your dopamine levels by 250% in under 10 minutes are cocaine and ice plunge.
And an orgasm.
Okay.
So the chemicals that are produced in the brain in an ice bath are quite similar to chemicals produced in the brain for an orgasm. You just don't get that physical sensation. Dr. Louisa Nicola, I learned through a workshop with her that you get, if you are submerging up to the neck below 35 degrees for 2 minutes, you get a 520% increase in norepinephrine and dopamine. So what's happening in the brain during that process is you are smoothing over tens of thousands of hardwired neural pathways created through stress and trauma. You are replacing them with brand new, tens of thousands of brand new neural pathways created from a place of meditative calm while producing copious amounts of norepinephrine and dopamine. So an ice bath below 35 degrees, full body submersion, 2 minutes, is a great place for repatterning. If you have any type of behavioral patterns you want to change, physical habits you want to change, thought processes you want to change, freezing cold water is a beautiful place to do that. It is an instant mood booster. It's an instant reset.
Yeah.
Those times when people feel like, oh, I just don't have it in me today, I don't have what it takes to take an ice bath, well, that's where you go to fill it all up. That's where you go to fill your cup back up. That's where you go for your recharge, your reset, your refill. So when you feel like you have nothing left to give yourself some cold.
Yeah, it's really neat. So we started, a friend and I, a men's retreat. We had the first one in October. We're doing the next one in December. And we started every morning with a cold plunge.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the guys, I think pretty much every single one who attended had never experienced it before. And the before and after was huge in terms of, like what you had mentioned, that feeling of the first time is I just did something hard.
Yeah.
Like that feeling of accomplishing something, conquering something difficult, the feeling of togetherness that, hey, we all did something hard
Community bonding.
together, and then the mood
Hmm.
elevation. So I was thinking about it afterwards, was that the same retreat, if we did everything to the T, the same, and we did a lot of stuff. We did breath work, we did combat, we did Temescal, which is a sweat lodge ceremony. We did a lot of different practices. We did drama therapy, but it's like that one aspect. If we just didn't start with the cold plunge, the retreat would not have felt the same. And not just because of the cold plunge itself, but the mood benefits of it, like what it did to change the tone of the.
And when you're doing that in a group, that oxytocin, that serotonin, like you are bonded for life. When you do that in a group of people, you are all bonded for life. You're all producing those feel good chemicals. You're all connecting on that level. And I find it to be incredibly powerful. Of everything that I've participated in where I brought cold as an experience, the experience is never the same if you don't have the cold. It just doesn't add up. Whether that's, a festival or an event, or I host sensory immersive experiences.
What is that?
So, with the Morozko method that I created, the goal is to bring yourself into your physical body. And so, what I do is I host experiences. Now, this can be for one person, two people, a group of people. And what we do is we create our own intention and repatterning for the experience. We engage all the physical senses. We experience the cold. We experience the hot. We do it together in this growth bonded experience. So I do this for team building, for couples workshops, for birthday parties. I mean, you can imagine the list goes on and on. But what it does is it creates this bond among your group and this experience of empowerment that you then get to take with you wherever you
Right.
go. So if you do this once and you never do it again the rest of your life, you're still a changed person.
Right. Fascinating. What do you make of, like you mentioned, you're the first company to bring this to the home.
Mm-hmm.
It's only in the last few years this has absolutely exploded.
Yeah.
What do you make of
Well,
that?
we created an industry, but it wasn't because, there was a need for it. There was this hole, there was this gaping hole of what we needed. And I think we're in this beautiful transition right now that so many things are being more widely accepted for health and healing, mental health, physical health, emotional health. So the breath work, the mindfulness, the meditation, hot and cold exposure, red light therapy, compression therapy. We're in a place now that, maybe 20 years ago, these things would have been taboo. Maybe 20 years ago, we would have been looked at like, someone practicing yoga in the 80s, you know. But now people are not only open to these alternative modalities, but it's also a remembering because we didn't invent the cold.
Right.
People have been practicing intentional cold exposure and deliberate cold exposure for millennia. This is much further. This goes much further back in our ancestry than just over the last few years.
Right. Or it just happened when taking a shower. I mean, there was really no alternative.
Say that again.
It just happened when taking a shower back.
Right. Yeah. Before we had heat, before the
Yeah.
Industrial Revolution, before we could control the climate temperature in every place that we went. I personally believe that the minute we invented fire, we became more technologically advanced than our bodies would ever biologically be able to keep up with. So as soon as we started doing that, the body was like losing the ability to put ourselves into these natural stressors. We don't ever have to feel cold. We could live in Michigan. We don't have to feel cold if we don't want to. This is an intentional
Right.
practice. This is something that we have to choose. And I think it's catching on because people are remembering what that really means to build resilience within the body.
Okay, so you see this as part of a much larger, on a wave
Yeah,
than
a
just cold
much
plunge.
larger wave of healing, of creating tools that we can carry with us everywhere we go and are essentially free. So, my breath, my mindfulness, hot and cold therapy, I can really get access to this just about anywhere. I can really do it for free if I choose. So I think that this is also, it's just a remembering of what tools do we carry with us everywhere and
Right.
how do we bring those to the light? How do we introduce these tools to people who are not aware?
Right. You think about, the amount of people going to, I don't know, therapy as a way to feel better or do other things to feel better. And here it is, like, so super accessible.
Well, and
Just
we
jump
need
in.
to access all parts. We can work through the stuff in the brain, but if we're not healing the
Yeah, yeah.
emotional or healing the physical, healing the mental, that's not enough. So it's this multi-pillared approach. We're finally in this stage that not only we're seeing these modalities of remembering, these ancient modalities coming back, but they're widely accepted. They're widely available. I can download an app on my phone for any one of these things,
Right.
which is really neat.
So you mentioned a few times hot and cold exposure, and there are places which do it going from freezing cold to hot and back and forth
Hmm.
several times. Your thoughts on that?
I love it. I think adding these external resiliences, adding these external factors to push our bodies to create those, it's like a muscle, like we rip and tear the muscle in order to grow a bicep. That doesn't feel comfortable. It does help us get stronger. So I think of that the same way when I think of extreme heat and extreme cold. Again, I
Like
can
one after the other.
control. Yeah, I can control my temperature wherever I go. But to intentionally put myself in these extremes is what's going to build my physical resilience and my stamina for withstanding that and for withstanding stress.
Right. Okay, so you're not a evangelist for this is the exact way to experience cold. This is a method you developed, and you have a
Hmm.
product that supports it.
Yeah.
But get it with an ice cube, get it hot and cold, get it in any
Yeah.
way.
Get it however you can. And you can use my meditations whether you're taking a cold shower, no matter what product you're in, even if you're just sitting in cold water, like you can use the meditation. It's just a guidance. It's just a suggestion. And I think the whole goal for me is to help people understand that we are in charge of creating our own physical, mental, emotional, spiritual resilience. We are in charge of that. If the placebo is the strongest pill that we market, what does that tell you about the power of the mind?
Right.
We have the ability.
Yeah. Do hard things.
Yeah.
You mentioned a few times getting up to your neck.
Hmm.
Is so is that to exclude the head or just to include the neck?
I love a good head dunk. I think it really balances out the entire experience. I typically head dunk towards the end, and it's always based on a wash day. And I think it's important that if you are in this practice and you're practicing head dunk, lean back, not forward. If you lean forward, you can overactivate the body's mammalian dive response. You can learn about this in the book Blue Mind by Wallace J. Nichols. And so if you go forward, you can pass out. So I just recommend that if you submerge the head, that you go backwards, not forwards. Okay to do before, during, or at the end of your ice bath. I submerge all the way up to the neck because I want to expose the vagus nerve, which is heavily located at the back of the base of the neck and then spreads throughout the spinal column in the brain. So I want the vagus nerve to be exposed to the cold as soon as possible because that's what's alerting my brain to produce those chemicals of norepinephrine and dopamine, which is also going to help me slow everything down. I also think it's really cute when I see people take ice baths and they got these little prayer hands. They're all like, oh, my hands hurt when I put them in, and I can stand so much longer when I don't put my hands in. Well, there's a reason your hands and your feet are the most uncomfortable. It's because they're the furthest away from the heart, and the discomfort that you're feeling is the constriction of your vascular system. Well, same as going two directions to build a bicep and a push up, we have to constrict and dilate the vascular system to get full health of our circulation. So if you're that person that keeps your hands out, I encourage you to put them in. Breathe through that discomfort. That's not pain. That is not what pain feels like. This is what cold feels like. We're just teaching our bodies what this physical sensation of cold feels like. So if your hands can't handle it, that's okay. Breathe into it. Practice. You can practice that discomfort away. So I personally believe in full body submersion, hands and feet included. End it with a head dunk and do it at 33 degrees. I'm extreme.
What do
I want my 2 minutes to have the most impact that it can.
right, I hear that. What do you think about the the they teach some of that to put your arms under your hands under your underarms as a way to warm it up.
I think that's cheating. I think that if you're protecting your hands and you're keeping them against your body, sometimes against, your belly or your thighs, you're not exposing your hands to the cold that they need in order to practice the resilience so that you don't feel that discomfort.
I hear that.
Expose the hands. If you do not expose your hands and your feet, you're not practicing with your hands and your feet.
Have you tried this snorkeling cold plunge? The snorkel cold plunge?
Yeah, I mean, I can hold my breath for a very long time underwater. And now that I'm used to the cold, the best thing I would say too is if it's below 35 degrees, don't open your eyes underwater. You don't want to freeze your cornea. And I hold my breath underwater. I mean, I don't sit there with a snorkel, or I think they've got those little straws now that you can do. I don't do that. I think it's excessive. But
It's
when
one of those
people
painful things
want
you've
to
ever
take
experienced.
themselves to the next level, there are
Yeah,
tools to do that. And I
yeah,
think that's fantastic.
yeah. I think when I did it the first time was just a few weeks ago. I think it was one of those painful things I ever experienced.
Really?
Yeah.
What part was painful for you?
First of all, the breathing is very tough
Yeah.
because you really have to get your breath in there
Yeah.
with the snorkel. They also have the one I got also has different adapters you can put on it to constrict it even more. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're not super relaxed, you're just not going to get any breath in.
Yep.
But the other is the throbbing pain on the front and back of my head. I just never felt anything like that. After 20
Wow.
seconds,
Yeah.
it was just unbelievable. I had to raise the temperature all the way just to get to just to be able to get comfortable with it. I raised it like 60 degrees, and now I'm slowly inching
Wow.
down there. But it was
Yeah, I've never had that before. That's very interesting.
I was excited because I felt like this is something that even if I get super comfortable at the lower temperatures, which I'm curious, I haven't played with these temperatures that you're talking about yet,
Mhm.
the 33, but this is something that just adds like a 10x. So is it something, because I've only been doing it for about, let's say, 8 months now on a regular basis, is it something that's continuously challenging? I mean, years in?
Yeah, I'm 6 years into this practice and I still fall off the practice. I still have those times where I'm just like, I don't wanna. And still, I will stand in front of an ice bath and stare at it and question my entire existence. Like, really? Do I need to do this? Technically, I've reversed the autoimmune, so do I still have to do this? And the answer is yes. It's my least favorite healing modality. And if I was to be given only one healing modality for the entire rest of my life, it's the one I would choose because it has the most impact with the shortest amount of time, and it affects every single aspect of the body, mentally, emotionally, physically, even spiritually. I am not the same person that I was 6 years ago when I started this practice. I've become more calm, more grounded, more responsive rather than reactive. I am able to manage my coping mechanisms and coping skills in stressful situations. It has changed me on a fundamental level.
Right, I can see that. And I've seen it. I've seen that with my wife. I think that it changed her personality,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah, it does. It really teaches us what calm feels like. And it really teaches us what is important. Is it important that I'm walking around elevated, defensive, and angry? How much am I accomplishing and getting done that way? How much more can I accomplish from this place of meditative calm? The greatest compliment I get when people are in my presence now is if they tell me, like, it just feels so good to be around you. You're so grounded. If you knew me 6 years ago, you would not have that same sentiment.
And you attribute it to
I attribute it to the
a
cold.
plunge. I mean,
It
obviously, you're doing
it
other things as
truly.
well, the meditation and the mindfulness and
Yeah, but it's the cold.
right,
It's the cold that taught me how not to live in a state of fight or flight, how not to live in a state of defensive
right, and that
attitude.
opened up everything else.
Opened up everything else.
Right. So I saw that on the retreat where I mentioned we had a bunch of different things we offered, and there was one particular individual which I saw he was able to fight off everything. A breath work. Okay, I won't. You can't force him to breathe. So he can think he's breathing. I'm sure he's trying, but he couldn't really get into that state
Yeah.
of a deep breathing, relaxed state. And we did the heat exposure. He bounced out because it just takes too long. I mean, the heat exposure took about it's like a 90-minute practice. So with the cold, obviously there's a lot of guys surrounding him, so he wasn't going to get out. And you try to hold your breath, but what it looked to me was almost like as the cold water was breathing him, like it just took over. It's like if you want to fight it, it'll just breathe for you, and it forces you into the deep breathing, whether you like it or not. And then
Hmm.
I saw that with my wife as well, just forced her into the deep breathing. It was the last thing she wanted to do, but I think it was one day she was tired and said, "Okay, maybe I'll try it."
Not going to fight it.
Maybe I'll try it. So she jumped in. It's like, wow, this was amazing. But then I saw the way it like took over her breathing as well, and I've seen changes in her personality that I actually attribute to the cold plunge. Like it
Yeah.
was the first time I saw it.
Yeah, and I think this is why it's so powerful with the Morozko method. When you meet the cold with stoicism and grace, it will bestow great gifts upon you. When I can sit in that physical discomfort without reactivity, there is nothing in my life that's going to provide a level of physical discomfort that I cannot sit stillness in. And that's also why I teach people when they get out to stand still in power pose. I want you to learn to be still in the midst of chaos, to truly find grounded, centered stillness, so that when you do respond, you're responding from an even place. You're responding from a mentally and emotionally stable place. No decision in life that we make should be made from a state of duress.
Right. Which is a little bit different, meaning the easiest thing to do after you jump out of an ice plunge is jump into warmer water,
Yeah.
and it warms you up
Yeah.
pretty instantaneously. Like
Yeah.
I do it.
You can rely on external factors.
Yeah, my cold plunge is behind us right next to my pool. So when I've done that, even if the pool is 85 degrees, it feels
so
like,
warm.
yeah, it feels like I couldn't tell it's not a
Right.
hot tub.
Yeah.
Right. So, which is a little bit different than the hot and cold that you see sometimes.
And I think it's important, even in a contrast practice. So when you're practicing hot and cold, I really like to allow 3 to 5 minutes between each modality. I want my body to warm itself up post cold. I want
Right.
my body to cool itself off post heat. I don't want to rely on the modality to do the work for me. I want my body to do the work. That's the whole point of building the resilience. The cold shock proteins will be stunted if I get into the heat too soon. The
Okay.
heat shock proteins will be stunted if I get into the cold too soon. I learned with Dr. Brian Call of Cell Regen in Hood River, Oregon, that he recommends you always start on cold and end on cold because we get access to heat pretty naturally.
Right.
We do not get access to those freezing cold temperatures naturally. So allowing the body to really do that work by starting on cold and ending on cold is the most powerful way to enhance your practice, no matter how many times you go in between.
Got you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the risks and the contraindications. You mentioned a few risks throughout, like in nature, not getting below your waist, having someone there, not opening your eyes in the cold.
Mm-hmm.
So, what are some more that you may have missed and contraindications?
If you'd asked me 5 years ago, I would say that there's no one in the world that can't take an ice bath. And what I've learned over the last 5 years is there are some contraindications. Any type of cardiovascular issue can be a contraindication. Any type of seizure disorder can be a contraindication. Syncope, which is any type of fainting disorder, can be a contraindication. Pregnancy can be a contraindication.
Why is that?
Well, it's a shock to the system.
Right.
I personally, what I've heard from my pregnant clients is what's good for the mom is good for the baby. If you've already started a deliberate cold exposure practice, just like a yoga practice or a running practice, and you're already used to it by the time you conceive, there shouldn't be too much of an issue continuing that.
Right.
But if you're starting the practice, that can be a shock to the system. And it's important to understand that that is a fragile state in the body, especially in the first trimester. I also know women who have been 6 months pregnant and started a deliberate cold exposure practice because when you're pregnant in Phoenix and it's 118 degrees, you'll do anything to cool off.
Right.
And so I also know women who have struggled with years of fertility issues, started deliberate cold exposure practice, get pregnant, and carry to term. I know so many women where that's been a story and a factor. So even with all these contraindications that I've mentioned, there are ways to approach the practice in a baby steps fashion. There are ways to get approval through your doctor or your physician to make sure that you're approaching it in a safe way. And you can gradually move into this practice. It does not have to be first ice bath at 33 degrees. That's my preference. It's where I like to start all of my clients is at 33 degrees, whether they've taken an ice bath before or not. But we do go through a little bit of preparation, making sure that you are in a healthy and approved condition for the practice.
Right.
Age is not a factor. I've had
Not-
people as young as 18 months in my ice bath. Kids love it. Kids absolutely love water, period, and cold water. They see the difference, especially if they've watched their parents practice. They are so attuned to those physiological changes within the body. They are absolutely going to notice your improvement in mood. They're going to sense even those chemicals of norepinephrine and dopamine being produced for you. So kids are naturally drawn to water, naturally drawn to cold water. And as they see their parents practice, they become curious and more engaged.
So you'd recommend it even for 2 or 3 minutes for a young child?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, let them decide. Let them decide. Help them in. Help them out. Teach them all about it. Teach them about
Right.
the ways to approach it with calm.
Very neat. Let's talk a little bit about cardiovascular, what you meant by that, and what kind of issues are we talking about? Because that encompasses a range of
Cardiovascular
issues.
covers a lot. I mean, heart stuff, we get into this practice with the hope that we are building resiliency in the vascular system. But some people come to this practice with low blood pressure, high blood pressure. Maybe they've had a bypass surgery. Maybe they're on medication. So there are times when I would recommend, especially if you're recently off of open heart surgery, make sure you get a doctor or physician's approval prior to approaching this practice. Now, that being said, again, you can start at warmer temperatures.
Right.
You can start just with hands and feet. You can start by splashing the face. You can start by stepping in, sitting down, standing up, and getting out, having it be less than 5 seconds. What we're doing is we're teaching the body that this shock that we feel in cold water is the sensation of cold. Often the brain doesn't know where to put that. So when
Oh,
I
I mean, you
put
can put it
someone
right. It can put it in the danger category.
right,
That's
and
what you're
so
saying.
when I introduce someone to the cold, as soon as their feet touch the water, I tell them, this is what cold feels like. Because the brain is searching all around. They've never felt this before. It doesn't know what to do with it. It's thinking danger, 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 fight or flight activated. But as soon as I say, this is what cold feels like, the brain creates a folder for this physical sensation of cold. It files it away there, and then it stops trying to freak out about it.
Right.
Like,
So, question
oh,
I'll get a lot when I introduce people to it is, can I get hypothermia, or at what point can that happen?
really, it's difficult. So many things are going to happen to the body prior to hypothermia. It's usually going to happen closer to that 30-minute mark. If you're at those freezing temperatures, you're going to get uncontrollable shivering and shaking. Your lips will start to turn blue. Your teeth will be chattering. You're going to start to experience numbness in your extremities. But all of these signs are going to be very prominent prior to getting hypothermia. And technically, cold water is not frozen. Hypothermia happens when the blood is frozen from the external temperature. Well, 33-degree water is not that external freezing temperature. So it's not going to freeze my blood. However, if I sit in it for 30 or 45 minutes, I could have adverse effects.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, which I've seen recommended pretty consistently of, 3 minutes. Do you know this number of 11 minutes a week? Have you heard about this?
Yeah, Dr. Andrew Huberman, I think, is the one that's saying 11 total minutes a week. So it doesn't have to be an 11-minute ice bath, but just get enough to equal 11 minutes a week. And now, any of the science about cold, whether that's our science or Huberman or Dr. Rhonda Patrick's science, anyone out there with science about the cold, understand that we are still gathering this information. We are still figuring it out. And the beauty of science is that as we learn more, our practices may shift, our opinions may shift, our theories may shift. I also think that this is a very individual practice. Each person's practice can be as unique to them as anyone else.
So where do you see it going from here? I mean, this has become your almost reason to exist in some way.
Is definitely a main motivator for my existence in this world. I see this as becoming as commonplace as hot tubs are, as commonplace as breath work and yoga, as commonplace as I'm going to do a workout and I'm going to practice hot and cold exposure. I would love to see a future where ice baths are just a part of a household appliance. You don't buy a new house without having an ice bath in it. There's a reason that we are going back to these ancient modalities and practices. It's because they work.
Right. Right. Yeah, that I can. When you said that, that can fit. Like the idea of just as commonplace as a hot tub.
Yeah,
I mean, you see it here. There was a pool with a hot
the
tub.
pool and a hot
created.
tub.
Almost everyone
Where's
does
your
that.
ice bath?
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, I was at a hotel a few months ago. I loved it. They had the pool, a hot tub, and a cold plunge.
Yeah, and there are still places like I think the Turkish bathhouse in Miami is closed down now, but there are still places in New York, in Miami, in Russia, in the Netherlands, in Sweden, in Germany, where you specifically go to have a soak. You soak in the heat, you soak in the cold, you get uncomfortable. Some of the greatest business meetings have happened at these times. I mean, people have been doing this for centuries. Like instead of holding a business meeting in an office or at lunch, you go and you have a soak. You talk about the uncomfortable things. You're restoring your body while you're doing it. You're calm while you're doing it. You walk out, you shake hands. It's a great day. These are ancient practices.
Are there any benefits I missed asking you about? I know people talk a lot about brown fat
Working
creation.
out. People always want to know, like, when I'm working out, when's the best time to take an ice bath? And the best time to take an ice bath is before your workout. So if you work out and then within 20 minutes you start your strength training, you will get a surge in testosterone production, which is really fantastic. This is great for men. This is great for women. So we call it pre-cooling your workout. You're basically working out and using your workout to warm up post-cold. If you're like an endurance trainer, or if you're in a really difficult workout regimen and this muscle soreness is more what you're concerned about, you wait about 3 to 4 hours after your workout, and then you take an ice bath to help move that lactic acid, move the circulation through the body, and help with the soreness. You want to wait 3 to 4 hours because that inflammation is doing the work in building your muscle. So, if gains are your interest, you don't want to stop that anabolic process with cold water. You want it to do its full work. So, you
Got
wait 3 to 4 hours. If gains aren't your goal, bro, go ahead and take an ice bath after your workout. You might lose about 13% of what you just gained during that workout. So it's just keeping in mind of what are your goals, and truly take an ice bath where it fits for you. But keep in mind, if you want to build muscle, allow that 3 to 4 hours for that anabolic process to take effect.
Okay, I'm gonna try what you said about the cold plunge before a workout
Yeah.
because I've done the reverse a lot, but never.
It's so powerful. And that testosterone production is important for both men and women. For men, it's part of their virility, but so is for women. It helps us regulate our hormones. For women specifically, this can be so powerful for PMS, for endometriosis, for PCOS, for difficult cycles. I mean, I've seen it help so many women in so many ways, even women without thyroids. I've seen this help regulate their hormones.
A time of day that's better. I mean, intuitively, I do it in the morning usually, but
A lot of people do it in the morning because, like, you get your hardest thing over with at the beginning of the day. Everything else is easier. It's a great way to wake up. I personally hate that idea. I like my mornings to be slow, calm, and like warm. I love the afternoon. I like it because I transition from the workday to the personal evening times, and so it's a nice little transition. Whereas I used to go to happy hour, now I take an ice bath. Also, in the evening is really powerful. If you suffer from insomnia, if you struggle sleeping, taking an ice bath about 90 minutes before bed can have a powerful impact on your sleep. I do say wait to do it about 90 minutes before
right,
bed.
because it will wake you up.
Yes, and have a strong, solid bedtime routine. But yeah, any time of day, really, just get it done. And be careful with the challenges. I see challenges out there. I'm going to do it 7 days, 30 days, 365 days. I think this is a practice that's really important to check in with your body. I also think that this practice helps reignite that communication between the brain and the body. So you're going to know the difference between your monkey mind saying, I don't wanna, and your body saying, I really need to. So instead of just saying, I'm going to do it every day because this challenge said so, I think it's a really good idea to check in with your body and say, what do I need today? And then determine from there.
Got it. Anything else we missed? I like it
Gosh,
because I talk a lot about cold plunge, and I feel like it's the first time really going into the
yeah,
science, the practice,
I
the
really
benefits.
think it's important to find a way to meet the cold with calm. I think that when I think the way that we meet the cold is indicative of the way that we meet stressors in life. And so even if you've never tried the Morozko method, give it a try one time and see how your practice changes through that stillness. I've worked with a lot of professional athletes, combat veterans, sober living facilities, first responders, even people who are in that constant state of fight or flight because they have no choice. Meeting the cold with calm brings a completely different type of grounded presence, not just to your cold practice, but to every practice in life where you stress yourself or where you experience stress.
Really interesting. You know Dan Brule?
I do not.
So he's a very famous breathworker. So I interviewed him a few weeks ago,
Cool.
and I guess he challenged it. He challenged it more by name. Obviously, all respect to Wim Hof and what he's done and
Yeah.
the amount of people he's introduced to it. But we did a cold plunge together, and he said, I'm a little bit different than the way Wim Hof does it, where he's kind of like brave the cold, jump in. So what he showed was, he's like, get into that point of discomfort. So wherever that is, like get in real slow, and like that comfort, then breathe and relax, and then move a little further, and then breathe and relax, and move a little further.
Gosh,
It's
that sounds
what
like
it
torture
sounds
to me.
harder, right? It sounds tough, but the idea is kind of similar,
Yeah.
which is meet it with complete calm.
Right. And anticipate that first 30, the first 30 to 40 seconds, 30, 45 seconds is going to be the most difficult. And so when you get in, I want you to submerge the neck right away because then you activate the vagus nerve quickly, which is going to then produce those feel-good chemicals, which are going to help. So that first 30 to 45 seconds, expect that you will hyperventilate. Expect that it's hard to take a deep breath. Expect that you'll feel tingles
Right. And
in
it
your
gets better.
fingers and your toes. Yes, it gets better. And in 30 to 45 seconds, that's when all those feel-good chemicals kick in and you can really focus on that deep breath. But if we can calm ourselves before stepping in, that is part of it too.
Right. I always start with the dunk at the beginning because I found when I didn't, then you know that feeling when you're like walking into a pool, or kind of the same face you made when I was talking about the way Dan Brule recommended, where every inch you go in, it's uncomfortable.
Slow
So I kind of
torture.
feel that the whole time if I don't
Yeah.
go all the way in. So I start by going all the way in and then
Yeah.
come out.
I
But I
like
understand
that
here,
too.
Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that too.
Right.
I like the going all the way in because then there's no hesitation.
Right.
And that's another thing that I teach is get in without hesitation. We're not saying plop in. We're not saying jump in. Don't drop yourself in like I did with my first ice baths. Get in with intention. Get all the way in right away. Allow the chemicals to do the work. Allow the cold to do the work. Allow your body to surrender. And I think that's what Dan's trying to say. It's like find that peace,
Right.
find that surrender. Because this is really a beautiful place to practice that.
Right. And then the benefits show up in a lot of different.
A lot of different ways.
Yeah. I found that place, right, where you have to access an ice plunge, where it feels tremendously painful, but I'm completely okay.
Yeah.
Just knowing that's translated to a lot of different areas where sometimes I'm uncomfortable. I'm like, hey, it's probably not going to last more than 3 minutes, and I've done ice plunge. Like,
Exactly. Like
We'll sit through it.
anything that would, like I said, you could be cut off in traffic. And it used to be I'd get cut off in traffic and I'd let out all the expletives and I'd freak out and all those things. Now I get cut off in traffic and it's like, oh, glad no one got hurt. All right, we're still going. So even my life is more palatable. Even my life is more smooth and soft. And the hard things that I go through in life, I mean, this last year I've been through divorce, I've been through all these different changes, and all of those were easier to deal with because of what I've learned in this practice.
Right. That's cool that you're able to transition out of a 9 to 5 desk job into.
To 60, 70
Yes.
hours a week as an entrepreneur. I totally agree.
Well, it's that and doing something you love and that's purposeful and meaningful, and you're seeing the benefits of in your own life and in others. Yeah.
It is. And it's one of those things that taught me I would rather work 60, 70 hours a week, putting out this healing benefits into the world, sharing this healing with the world. I would rather devote my life to a life of service in order to share this with the masses. And I just want to say a thank you to you because just even sitting here having this conversation on your podcast is helping me realize my ultimate dreams, my greatest vision, which is to share the healing benefits of the cold with everyone who will listen. So I thank you for sharing your platform for that.
Yep. Appreciate that. Thank you. Just one question, a little outside of the cold plunge, but just on that journey of going from the 9 to 5 work week to embracing a passion and, making money through it. I'm sure there was a lot of fears, discomforts, naysayers. You want to talk a little about that journey?
Absolutely. I mean, first, we created the space with a product. Then I created a space with this mindful meditative practice, the certification course. And so
Through all this, you were still working?
Pardon me?
Through all this, you were still working in the city?
I became our very first employee. I want to say it was in 2020. Nope. March of 2019, I became our first employee. So I was liberated from my last job. I was fired. I would say launched or liberated. It was definitely the greatest thing that could have happened, me becoming our first employee. Building Forge in our backyard. And there are a lot of things that people do not prepare you for when it comes to entrepreneurship and forging a path in an area where there hasn't been one before.
Right.
And that's that everything will feel like adversity. Everything will feel like a challenge. Everything will feel like it's wrong. And you just have to follow your heart and your intuition. If you truly believe that you know what is best for you, for your company, you have to follow that intuition, even when all the naysayers are saying it doesn't have to be freezing. You can go ahead and use harsh chemicals. You can cut corners here. What about your bottom line? And so for me, I did not get into this to make money. I'm still not in this to make money. I'm in this to save lives and change the world. And so I think your mission's important too. Understanding, like, if you're going into an entrepreneurial endeavor with the goal to make money, understand what energy you are attracting there. I'm going in this to save lives. I'm going in this for the greatest currency in the world, which is health and healing. And that comes with sacrifice. That comes with a lot of sacrifice. I mean, it destroyed my home by trying to do this out of the backyard. This had an impact on my marriage because my ex-husband is and also was my business partner. And so it was learning that dynamic of being in a romantic relationship with someone and in business with someone, having that someone be also a mentor to me. Jason has taught me so many things that I would love to scream and hoot and holler about and say, you're wrong and this and that, and not wanting to just be told what to do all the time by my partner, understanding that he saw things at times that I didn't. Even Tom, challenging me in so many ways to put out the certification program. I was terrified. I was like, who am I? Who am I to say that I can create this program to certify people? And now the feedback is unreal. Like, I couldn't stop doing this if I wanted to. Thank goodness I don't want to. The other thing people don't prepare you for in entrepreneurship is the giving up. And it's not just giving up in your life. It's as I became our first employee, and I created this experience where now we need another employee, and I'm passing that on to them. I create a department in shipping. I'm managing all of our shipping. Then it becomes so big that I need people to take that over. Sales, customer service, same thing. I should never have been in sales and customer service, but growing that to a point where I need to pass that on to a team of people. So you end up in this period of like complete and ultimate overwhelm where you're doing it all and you're doing too much, and then you get to pass it on. And so you slow down a little bit before you can grow again. And then when you do that, you're eliminating all these things from your plate. And so you've got all this space and all of this room. And I'm going through that transition again right now. I just stepped away from the day-to-day of Morozko Forge. I'm focusing solely on the Morozko Method. And so all of this space and room just opened up for me. And it comes with a grief process. Every time I gave up a position and gave it to capable hands and passed it on to someone else, I went through a grief process.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, because this is my brainchild, right? This is Jason, Tom, and I's brainchild, our baby.
So you still work with your ex-husband on this?
I still work with my ex-husband and my
neat.
business partner. We've got a fantastic relationship. It's been part of that forced, post-traumatic growth experience. But you create something to a point that you're overwhelmed with it. And that's how you know that you need to hire someone to take it over. And when you do that, you know that no one is ever going to treat your business the way you treat your business. You can put it in the best, most capable hands, but it's still not going to be theirs. And so there's that like giving up the baton, the giving up of the baby to be raised by the next person, and then the space that's created. You go from an entrepreneur mindset where you are working, tens of hours every single day. You are on 7 days a week for 365 days a year. And then all of a sudden it's quiet. And I feel, speak from me in this experience, I feel for one, the emptiness and the grief that I'm no longer needed. And I don't have that validation of solving all the problems, of being the go-to and having the 52 million emails and signal messages and chat messages for everyone needing me for every little thing. And that's a good thing, but it creates an emptiness. It creates a void. It creates this quiet and this peace where for years there was no quiet and peace. And so I personally go through a grief process. I have to put that to bed. I have to let that go. I have to accept that even though it's no longer being managed by me, it's being managed by people I've chosen or people my partners have chosen. We all have the goal to make this company grow and become the best that it can be. And so I know that I'm doing the right thing, and it feels so wrong. It feels so wrong to like give my baby to someone else or to entrust someone else with my life's work.
How many employees are there now in the company?
A little over 30, and then we've got contractors throughout the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's a product that's made everywhere now?
No, it is handcrafted in Phoenix, Arizona, and we ship all over the world.
I got you. And then you have installers or whatever it is.
We do have technicians. We have local technicians in different hubs and spots that, will install. I mean, it's plug and play. You plug it in, you fill it with water. It's ready to go. So there's no assembly. We treat it like a flat, fragile item when shipping, so it's very well cared for throughout shipping. Then we have local technicians that are certified in our product or that are trained in our product.
Joe Rogan uses this one, is that?
Yeah, he does. He sure does.
Yeah, he's
Huberman does too. He'll say that he has two. He has the plunge and he has the Morozko. And the plunge is the one that he uses the most. And when he's ready to be scared, he uses the Morozko. I'm paraphrasing there, but it's something like that.
Okay. So I have a few of the plunges. So
That's great.
We'll see.
That's great. Yeah, there's room for everyone. This is a blue ocean. There is so much room. And the whole point is get uncomfortable and get cold. That's the whole point.
Right. I didn't understand until we spoke that yours made the ice. It's actually an interesting feature.
Most people do not understand that our product, I mean, we could say it till we're blue in the face and often do. Most people do not understand that our product makes its own ice.
Right. Yeah, I didn't know when I bought the first one, I had no idea what I was looking for.
Yeah.
I was researching, I'm like, what are the differences? Why are there so many different prices? Trying to understand it, but I was like, okay, I just want something that's 24/7 and cold. And what you talking about the chemicals as well.
Yeah, we didn't start out to make a luxury product. It wasn't our intention to make a product that was inaccessible by many people. We just built the best product we knew how. And it was also important for us to keep manufacturing in the United States. During COVID, when a lot of people were losing jobs and businesses were closing, we were hiring people and creating jobs.
Right. This is cool that this was like there was a major growth for you during COVID.
Yeah.
So your COVID wasn't so bad.
So bad in some levels. I did more traveling than I think I ever have.
During COVID.
Yep. We created all kinds of ice baths for people building out their home gym and other healing spaces
Right.
because people were really understanding, well, what do we need to do to create the best possible environment for our own immune systems? And how can we do that on our own? So it was nice to see that, even though the terrors of COVID happened and all of those horrible things happened, it was still enlightening for a lot of people to reevaluate, like, how am I treating myself? How am I showing up in the world? How am I
100%.
giving myself the best possible opportunity to move through these type of stressors?
Right. So this change out of the business is very recent for you.
Yeah. Yeah, just
Fully
since
out of the day-to-day.
August, September.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Tom's doing a great job hiring the right type of team members to replace, everything that I was doing and everything that Jason was doing. Jason's also, exploring his next opportunities. We're still part of the business and fully in support of everything that Tom's doing with Morozko Forge. So it's going to be incredible to see the next step of growth and the next step of healing in this process.
Got you. So talk a little bit about your certification program. What is that?
And so the Morozko Method is a certification program where you're going to learn about the best practices, the contraindications, how to take an ice bath, how to guide someone using the trademark technique of the Morozko Method to guide an ice bath. You're also going to learn how to grow cold as a business. Whether you have an ice bath or not, you can grow a business on offering cold as a service or as an experience. So I talk about contrast sessions and sensory sessions and what it takes to create an experience around the cold and how to use the cold for behavioral repatterning and physical repatterning. It is an 8-hour course with full certification. You will join other certified guides from around the world. I offer this as an online offering, so you can take it self-paced, self-guided, open enrollment. You can sign up at any time with full certification or in-person workshops. So tomorrow I'm actually teaching an in-person workshop in Clearwater, Florida.
Oh, neat.
January 27th, I'll be teaching a workshop in Sedona, Arizona.
How long are the workshops?
8 hours.
Oh,
So
it's
it's a
one
full
day.
day
Yeah.
workshop. And then February 9th, I'll be teaching a workshop in Austin, Texas. You can find all of this information on my website, adriennejezick.com, as well as the morozkoforge.com website. And you can learn more about it anywhere that you Google the Morozko Method.
Neat. Morozko is spelled?
Morozko.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Morozko.
Morozko is kind of a Father Winter, Jack Frost sort of methodology, basically saying that if you meet the cold with stoicism and grace, it will bestow great gifts upon you.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts?
Again, any amount of cold is a good amount of cold. If you are uncomfortable, you are doing the work. Don't let anyone tell you how you should be living your life or living your practice. Follow your intuition. And if you need help, reach out to me. I am accessible. You DM me on Instagram, you send me an email, I'm going to respond.
That's
Might take
awesome.
a couple days, but I'll respond.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming out and for sharing this. I imagine I benefited indirectly because I just kept seeing it, kept hearing about it, and I said at some point I got to try it.
I
I'm
love
glad
it.
I did.
Thank you for having me. This is a pleasure.
Yes, thanks so much.
Mhm.
Welcome to Florida. I hope you enjoy your trip.
No, you're